From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here, and coming up today, K-State's Dan O'Brien will comment on the surprising estimations on U.S. corn and soybean production released by the USDA yesterday as part of his weekly segment on the grain market trends. Then K-State's Robin Reid will talk about new information that she's put together that'll help you Kansas producers benchmark your operations' economic status. She'll be presenting that at K-State's Risk and Profit Conference next week. Also, K-State's Ajay Sharda will invite you crop producers to a special Yield Monitor workshop taking place on the campus this coming Monday, where you can learn how to use your Yield Monitor data more productively. And on Kansas agricultural weather, K-State's Mary Knapp. All that here on Agriculture Today.
Have you ever wondered why livestock producers burn Kansas pasture? Here's the deal. Controlled burning helps preserve the prairie and allows every bite feeder cattle eat to be the most nutritious. National Wildlife and Parks also feel it is a necessity to help with wildlife populations.
So the next time you see a Kansas pasture burning, know it's for the good of our wildlife, our prairie, and our livestock. This message was brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
Tuned in to Agriculture Today, and in the wake of yesterday's USDA crop production and grain stocks reports, and those crop production numbers caused a few market watchers to raise a collective eyebrow when they were rolled out by the department yesterday. We'll get into what all of that means with Dan O'Brien joining us now for his weekly commentary on the grain market trends. He is a grain market economist for K-State Research and Extension. So the corn and soybean yield forecasts were well above expectations, Dan, and the market responded accordingly right after the report was released.
Yes, I think that there's a lot of questions, especially about the corn number. Good analysts with good track records, Landworth, Ajay O'Brien, others were giving their best judgment, thinking along the lines of 13.3 to 13.6 billion bushels. Overall average of what the USDA was going to guess, was going to project, was closer to 13.8, and here this number came in on the high side. So arguably, this projection for U.S. corn production of 14.153 billion bushels is about 500 million higher than had been expected.
And how does that happen? That's the pressing question even today.
Well, the USDA probably is being cautious, not wanting to cause markets to hop around until they know for sure what's going on. Probably the biggest issue that's out there is to look at how much drought damage there is in those northern states. Here we sit in Kansas looking to the north of us into Nebraska, particularly South Dakota, North Dakota, on into Montana, and now seeing severe drought conditions showing up in sections of southern Iowa, and really, if you can, take the southwestern two-thirds of the state of Iowa, they're in some aspect of drought, and we have dry conditions in our part of the world too. And an area of the United States that's no small agricultural area, the Pacific Northwest, is also showing dry conditions, just as dry as Iowa and elsewhere. So anyway, we've got these areas with problems and other late planting, whatever issues in other states, and yet when we look at the state-by-state numbers, you do see some cutbacks in corn yield in North Dakota, South Dakota, again down 21, 37 bushels from previous estimates, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois being down, etc. But in the overall scheme of things, there's enough gain apparently off in to the eastern states, Ohio, Michigan, in the south, even Nebraska is projected to be up 5 bushel per acre, even with some of their dry conditions. So I guess maybe the best word, Eric, I've heard with regard to these numbers is quote, suspicion.
Right.
And is there a conspiracy there? No, there's not a conspiracy. Basically, the USDA takes what they have in hand for what they can consider, and they have very specific rules that allow them at certain months to consider certain things. And given that their processes, which are designed to be cautious and as close to objective as can be, well, they came up with this number. It really puts the onus, the responsibility, or the focus on crop conditions going forward, and all that much more of I guess everybody's attention on the September, October, November crop reports. One thing about it, though, what this does, it should add a strong dose of caution to anybody that's wondering about forward pricing grain, what they might do for feed grains as we head off from now into fall. Because right now we got a big corn number, 14 billion bushel plus, that the USDA stated, and unless there is an adjustment below 14 billion to 13.9, 13.8, something like that, we are on the path right now with this report towards serious low prices that come this fall harvest for feed grains at a minimum, and frankly, for the soybean numbers as well. Right. So I don't know that we should project that yet, but these numbers, if they hold up, would be aiming us towards a low-price fall in 2017.
Well, you hinted at it right there. Does all of this apply, in principle anyway, to the soybean market, in that the USDA's projection of 4.38 billion bushels was far above what most traders had anticipated?
Sure seems like the same procedural approach, doesn't it, Eric, except just one month later. Mm-hmm. Again, we need to get through the month of August with flowering and other aspects of U.S. soybean crop development before we can really christen this as a 4 billion bushel plus soybean crop. But here, the first number out is that very thing. Again, 4.381 billion bushels, higher than last year's 4.307 number. And if that holds up, then again, the USDA projected prices in the $8.45 to $9.15 range. Again, $9.30, $9.40, $9.50 thereabouts. Really, if there's anything that's a surprise, is if with 4 billion bushel soybean crops plus in the U.S., if that holds up for 2 years in a row, and the record high soybean crop from down in South America, in Brazil in particular, that we're holding in the $8 to $9 to $10 range. It's a testimony to how much we're relying on strength of export demand for soybeans coming from China, primarily China, a few other places in the world. That without that strong demand for soybeans to prop up that supply-demand balance sheet and keep prices at least in the $8 to $9 range, we'd be seeing a lot tougher times in the soybean market.
Yeah. Well, all of this will amp up the attention on that next USDA crop production report to be released in September, of course. Let's move on over to the wheat complex, Dan, and talk about the positive, and that is on the export scene. We've seen some good sales and movement of late.
Yes, more so on the overall soybean export number. For hard red in particular, we had just a so-so week, being down a little bit. But for overall U.S. wheat exports, and that would probably, you'd be looking mainly at spring and white as the varieties. 21 million bushels approximately. We need about 18.5 to meet the USDA's projection for this whole marketing year. So that's really good news. And hard red winter wheat has been running pretty strong also, just had a slower week this week. But if there's anything that's a positive in our markets, especially with our situation in Kansas, with still sizable supplies around, it's that we have some export movement. If these numbers hold up, the next, I guess, ag decision on our radar in Kansas for crop production will be what our plannings are. So, here we're sitting in August. We're going from August on into September, another crop report again coming in early September. If we don't see positive price signals for wheat, you wonder what Kansas farmers will do in terms of their wheat seedings off into the late September, early October time frame. So we'll be watching for that, but there's a lot riding on the direction of markets in the wheat market and all these markets as we head off in the next 2 or 3 months.
Right. Well, to note, you will be involved in a session or two at the Risk and Profit Conference coming up here at K-State next week, and you'll be getting into all this and likely much more, Dan, correct?
Yes. We're going to be talking about, of course, the grain market outlook and trying to hit on the judiciously judged high points that are most important to people. And we'll also be, along with Art Barnaby and Beth Yeager in our department, talking about non-convergence in wheat, and have been developing information that will present a taste of there and go beyond that in helping people to think through how to manage this coming VSR, the VSR variable storage rate process that'll be showing up in the March 2018 contract. If we come into a period of low prices, have sizable carries in the market, then we could see the VSR come into action. And when that does, it affects the carries and, frankly, probably the most profitable way to approach wheat markets here in Kansas and throughout these Great Plains states where have hard red winter wheat as a staple crop.
All right. And looking forward to what you have to pass along at Risk and Profit next week. So we will see you there and then. Thanks, Dan.
Eric.
With those comments on the grain markets, that's Dan O'Brien, grain market economist, K-State Research and Extension. And before we close out this segment, just a quick glimpse to the Kansas numbers from the USDA crop production report out yesterday. Again, based on August 1st conditions, the Kansas corn production number for this year forecast at 665 million bushels. That would be 5% below last year's production. Yield forecast 133 bushels per acre, down 9 bushels from last year. Grain sorghum, 194 million bushels forecast, down 28% from last year. The sorghum yield is pegged at 79 bushels per acre. That would be down 12 bushels from 2016's crop. And the Kansas soybean production forecast, a record high, 193 million bushels, up slightly from last year. The soybean yield for Kansas forecast at 41 bushels per acre, down 7 from last year. Again, the Kansas numbers from that USDA crop production report posted yesterday. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and when we return, we'll speak with another K-State agricultural economist about the principles of economic benchmarking for the farm or ranch, and some new information from K-State that can help guide that process. That's next, here on the K-State Radio Network.
Hamburgers, roast, ribs, steak, or whatever you prefer. Beef, it's what's for dinner. Kansas cattle farmers produce 7.5 million head of cattle per year. It takes about 7 tablespoons of peanut butter to get the same amount of protein in 1 serving of lean beef. Support your local Kansas farmers and ranchers. Eat beef. This message was brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
Agriculture Today returns now. We've been telling you about the upcoming Risk and Profit Conference hosted by K-State Agricultural Economics. It's set for next Thursday and Friday, the 17th and 18th of August. And there's another presentation that we want to inform you about right now, and it's very apropos given our current financial situation in production agriculture. The value of benchmarking farm financial information as you go along in your farm and ranch management. We'll talk over that now with Robin Reid, agricultural economist with K-State Research and Extension. She's the one that will be sharing information on benchmarking at Risk and Profit. And benchmarking, why is it more in the limelight now? It's always been around, Robin.
Well, knowing your financials, looking at your financial statements of your farm is always important, but, with the tough agricultural times that we have right now, I think as a manager, this has become more important just to assess the business. But also from a lender's perspective, financial conditions are just tight right now where lenders are wanting more information, assessing those statements a little more tightly, and so there's a lot of reasons to be looking at them right now, but it's a good thing to be doing any time in your business.
Let's define benchmarking. It's a running account of what's happening financially, economically on the farm or ranch, but it's beyond that, isn't it?
Well, and there's two ways you can benchmark. One is just looking at your operation year to year. If you produce these financial statements at the same time every year, usually January 1st or so, you can look at what's the progress your business has made throughout a certain period of years. The one that we're going to really highlight in this session is benchmarking against similar farms. And this is kind of hard to do, but here in Kansas, we're real fortunate to have the Kansas Farm Management Association. And so what I've done for the past 2 years now is look at subsets of their farms, such as region of Kansas, the size of the farm, the enterprise mix, such as livestock or crops. And I can pick out a group of farms and put together their financial ratios so a farm in that area can select that and look at their ratios compared to that farm. So really they can benchmark, look at what areas they have strengths or weaknesses in compared to other farms in their area.
We talk about ratios as benchmarking tools. You might expand on what are some of the primary things that producers should key in on as they think about benchmarking.
And we actually are going to spend a lot of time in this session on that because I think without a good understanding of financial statements and how they're put together, what those ratios mean, how they're calculated, benchmarking is really the next step. And before you understand the basics, it's hard to actually make management decisions with those ratios. So we're going to kind of go through the basics of the balance sheet and the income statement, what's included in that, how you get the information to build one, and then look at the ratios that can come out of here. Liquidity is something right now that we talk about a lot. How that's defined, a lot of farmers might not actually know. It's, you're looking at your current assets and your current liabilities. And if you had to pay off those current liabilities with your current assets, are you in a financial position to do that and still be a viable operation? So, that's something to look at. Solvency looks at your total assets and your total liabilities. Most of them, we look at the debt to asset ratio as a good indicator of this. And what that shows you is just what proportion of your farm assets are owed to creditors. What proportion do you actually have outright? And that's a really good measure to track over time to see if your debt is increasing or stable or, ideally as you're paying down debts, the longer you've been in farming. So there's just a number of things that you can do once you understand these financial ratios. Profitability, your return on assets, your return on equity. Net farm income is a number we talk about a lot, but I don't know how many producers actually know how that's defined or how that number's put together. So we're going to focus a lot just on those basics, too, of what those numbers are and how we go about calculating them.
But generally, Robin, as producers would look at these measurements, they need to do more than just concentrate on one or two, don't they? They need to have a broad spectrum of what's going on there.
Yes, and the decision or the benchmarking tool that I put together focuses on 11 different ones. But there's actually even more than that you can go into to evaluate your business. And as I talk about financial statements, I can just imagine they really do make your head spin. But really understanding them can help you as a manager to identify some of those areas in your business that may be lacking or may need improvement. So that's kind of the focus of this session.
To help in that respect, you say that you and a colleague here at K-State who's involved with the Kansas Farm Management Association will be unveiling at Risk and Profit something that you describe as a decision tree to sort this all out?
Yes. So as I mentioned, this is kind of the second year of the tool that I put together to help farms benchmark, and that is using Kansas Farm Management Association farms. What it does is give you a distribution of the farms in your cohort that you selected, and it'll let you see where your farm falls within your peers. So in that tool, you have the option both looking at last year, which is 2016, and then a 10-year average. Because as we all know, financial ratios right now aren't looking as good as they have been in the past. So that 10-year really is another good comparison. But kind of the piece of information that we're expanding on from here in this session is once you've identified in your business what ratios maybe aren't so good, the thing to do next is how do we improve on those? What aspects of the business are contributing to those vulnerable or, slightly bad financial ratios, and how do we go about improving them? So Mark Dykman is actually the associate director with the Kansas Farm Management Association, and he put together something that the economists are using with their members, but we're going ahead and also publishing for the public. And it's a flowchart or decision tree that just looks at, okay, if your return on equity is greater than your return on assets, but you're not getting a very good return on your equity, what does that point to in your business that's making that occur? And you can kind of just flow down through looking at operating profit margin and asset turnover ratio, and it just points to some things to look at in your business as to what might be contributing to some of these ratios not looking so good. Just to give you an example, if your return on equity is less than your return on assets, which is not how you want it, but your return on asset is pretty good, this might just be showing the cost of debt is exceeding the average return on your investments or your assets. So you might want to look at restructuring that debt so the interest is not as expensive or a lower interest rate. To selling unproductive assets, maybe you just have too many assets in your business for the size of the business. Or leasing instead of purchasing, helping to just reduce that asset base but still maintain the productivity. So there's a number of different areas in this flow chart that you can get to and look at different things. Family living is another one that is taking a toll on a lot of our farms right now too, that we just can't support the family living that we could in the past. So it's a really good tool just to kind of identify those areas.
It's very instructive, and once again, if this, then that clarifies this. And so you'll be presenting that at Risk and Profit and walking through some examples, right?
Exactly. Yep. The session is a 50-minute session, so like I said, we'll be starting with the basics, looking at financial statements and what they indicate as far as the ratios and how we go about putting those together, get into the benchmarking as far as your own farm and the decision tool against the other farms in your area, and then going into the flow chart of where do we go from here once we've identified the ratios in our business that are strong or weak. So it should be a very good session. Like I said, this stuff can really make your head spin, so we're going to try to make sure that we present a good session where everybody can get something out of it, whether you've been working with ratios for a long time or you're kind of new to looking at financial statements.
Excellent. And the breakout session, again, is entitled Benchmarking Farm Financials During Challenging Times. It's one of some 20 breakout sessions that you can choose from as you participate in Risk and Profit Conference at K-State. And in a moment, we'll remind you of how to go about registering even at this late date. It ought to be a fine session. Looking forward to it. Robin, thanks for a quick overview of what you'll share at Risk and Profit on benchmarking.
Thank you, Eric, and I look forward to seeing everyone there next week.
She's Robin Reid, Research and Extension Agricultural Economist at K-State. She'll be sharing this information in much greater detail at the 2017 Risk and Profit Conference at Kansas State University. The dates, once again, are this next Thursday and Friday, the 17th and 18th of August. The location is the Alumni Center on the K-State campus. And to get into the registration details and the program itself and what all is being offered up, you can go simply to agmanager.info for all of that, including the registration procedure. agmanager.info, but don't delay, for this conference is coming up extremely quickly now, and it's one to certainly take in. Producers, next week, you're listening to Agriculture Today, and we'll return after this break with more here on the K-State Radio Network.
Did you know every Kansas farmer feeds 128 plus people?
Kansas farmers are hard workers, dependable, authentic, and sensitive.
Not only do farmers put food on your table, but they put clothes on your back and fuel in your car.
For more information about Kansas farmers, visit K-State Research and Extension online or stop by your local extension office. This message has been brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
Now on Agriculture Today, and a quick moment here to let you know about an opportunity for you crop producers to learn more about improving the utility of your yield monitors. This will be a yield monitor workshop coming up this coming Monday here at the K-State campus at the Biological and Agricultural Engineering Department. To let us know more about this opportunity is Ajay Sharda, Precision Agricultural Engineer with K-State Research and Extension. AJ, you're wanting producers and others to take advantage of this chance to talk yield monitor operation and interpretation, right?
Absolutely, Eric. Yield monitoring is still one of the very important aspects of understanding variability within anybody's production system. And we still have a lot of people who are learning, who are eager to adopt, and eventually get to a point where they can utilize the information derived from these yield maps to make some input management decisions. So just looking from all these perspectives, this yield monitor workshop, which is going to be at the Biological and Agricultural Engineering Department, and we are going to focus on a number of aspects of yield monitor setup, how to calibrate those yield monitors before you go out in the field for quality data collection. We're going to talk about some options which are available in the market. There are impact plate sensors, there are optical sensors. Then we're going to talk a little bit about how to extract that data from the monitor. There are a lot of people wanted to know that how easy that process is. Then the fun begins. There are a lot of things you can do once you have data in your hands. We will talk about some of the aspects of yield data cleaning. We will talk about some of the aspects of how to use that data in terms of input management. We would have people who would talk about some of the very unique case studies where they will bring the traditional yield maps in terms of 3 or 4 years or 5 years worth of data, and then they'll show that if you have quality data, this is how you can utilize to make seed prescription maps, variable rate seeding maps.
It should be a great exchange on all of these matters pertinent to making the most out of those yield monitors that producers have come to rely upon so heavily out there. And is there any requirement for pre-registration, AJ, or can folks just show up?
There is information out there at our Twitter feed which people can access, or people can call in Arlene Jacobson. Her number is 785-532-2926. So feel free to call her. You can still register, and we would recommend you guys registering so we know and head count and what we are expecting in terms of people coming in. But you are more than welcome to walk in a little bit early so you can fill in the paperwork, and we are ready to go.
Very good. And again, that is this coming Monday, August the 14th. The location is Seton Hall on the K-State campus, the home of the Biological and Agricultural Engineering Department at the university. 142 is the room number there. And it'll start at 9 o'clock in the morning, run until roughly 2 o'clock in the afternoon. For members of the Kansas Ag Research and Technology Association, also known as CARTA, of which K-State Research and Extension is a partner, no fee. And same for K-State Extension agents who'd like to attend. Anybody else, it's $25 to cover the cost of lunch and refreshments. But do call in your registration as soon as possible, and one of the best ways to do that is call Arlene at the department. 785-532-2926 is that number, and take care of that right away. AJ, good luck with this workshop coming up Monday. Thank you.
Thank you.
With a preview of that Yield Monitor workshop hosted by K-State, Ajay Sharda. He is a precision agricultural engineer, K-State Research and Extension. Next up, this week's Kansas Wheat Scoop. Here's Marsha Boswell.
Nearly 250 Kansas wheat farmers met in Wichita on August 8th for the Wheat U event, sponsored by the High Plains Journal and Indigo Ag. Dr. Eric DeWolf, professor of plant pathology at Kansas State University, was the keynote speaker, and his topic was a timely one: wheat streak mosaic, an old enemy with devastating impact. The viral disease caused a conservative $76.8 million in direct losses to wheat farmers this year alone, a loss of 19.2 million bushels of wheat. But why was wheat streak mosaic so bad this year? DeWolf said it was a combination of management practices and the environment. Fall weather conditions were ideal for the spread of wheat curl mites, which carry the disease and the virus. Mild fall temperatures favored the continued spread. In addition, there was no hard freeze until late November for many areas. DeWolf says the best way to get rid of wheat streak mosaic is to control volunteer wheat, as volunteer wheat is the most common host of the virus and the curl mite. Volunteer wheat can be removed with herbicides or tillage, but it's absolutely essential to allow time for herbicides to work. DeWolf says volunteer wheat must be dead and dry for 2 weeks prior to planting. It's necessary to have a wheat-free period, and you should watch out for volunteer in sneaky places, such as in double crop and cover crops. DeWolf asked conference attendees if your volunteer wheat is dying right at the same time as your newly planted wheat is emerging, where do you think those mites are going to go? He says if conditions are right, they will move directly into the newly emerged wheat. Kansas wheat farmers can also help stop the spread of the disease by choosing wheat varieties with the best available resistance and by avoiding early planting. DeWolf said there is WSM2 resistance genes available now in wheat varieties Oakley CL and Joe, but the resistance isn't as effective at temperatures above 70 degrees Fahrenheit. He also pointed out that other varieties, TAM 112, Bird, and Avery, slow the development of mite populations. He says when we say to avoid early planting, we're not talking about planting outside of the window for success of your wheat crop. He says we're encouraging you to plant on the later side of the recommended planting dates. There is good news when it comes to the future management of wheat streak mosaic. DeWolf said that improved genetic resistance is being developed at Kansas State. The WSM3 gene, which was discovered by Bert Freeby at the Wheat Genetics Resource Center at K-State, comes from wild relatives of wheat and is resistant to not only wheat streak mosaic virus. This resistance gene also provides protection from triticum mosaic virus and high plains mosaic virus as well. He says the best way to get rid of wheat streak mosaic is to control volunteer wheat. For Kansas Wheat, I'm Marsha Boswell.
Thanks, Marsha. And in a moment, K-State's Mary Knapp on Kansas agricultural weather, here on Agriculture Today.
Have you ever thought about where your food comes from? If you're thinking the grocery store, think again. Facts show that the American farmer feeds more than 129 people.
They are continually increasing and improving their operations. A wide variety of crops and livestock are grown in Kansas as well as the United States, providing food to your dinner plate.
Next time you see a farmer or rancher, thank them. For more information, contact K-State Research and Extension.
You're listening to Agriculture Today as we turn now to the latest from the Weather Data Library at K-State as we review Kansas agricultural weather once again with K-State Research and Extension climatologist Mary Knapp. Before we talk about anything else, Mary, let's do note that there was quite a round of severe weather the last 24 hours in several parts of Kansas and causing crop damage and otherwise.
Right. Basically what we had was a number of thunderstorm lines go through parts in northwest and west central. Then it reemerged into parts of central and south central Kansas. Hail, we're still waiting for the actual numbers on that, but hail as large as baseball size was reported in a number of locations with, of course, the attendant damage. And it should also be noted that there were a number of flood advisories out as well. So that was just another complication on top of everything else that has been negatively impacting the crops this year. It should also be noted that the rainfall distribution was not very even either. So there would be, in one county, you would have one location that had an inch or more of rain, and you'd have another place that didn't get a quarter of an inch of rain. So that makes it rather difficult to draw the maps, for example, for the U.S. Drought Monitor, and and look at that because, again, these storms have been highly localized in a number of occasions.
So this past week, where did we see the heavier rainfall and where were the locations that went wanting?
Well, let's start with the ones that went wanting, and that was most of the Central Division. The divisional average was just 0.23 of an inch, which is a quarter of what they would normally see in the week. So not surprisingly, that's going to be the area that's had the biggest expansion of moderate drought on the U.S. Drought Monitor. As far as the ones that had their share and more, that was the Southeastern Division. They averaged for the division 3.17 inches, which was just a shade under 4 times what they would normally see for the week. If we look at what the April to the present rainfall is across the state, statewide we're still averaging above normal for the growing season. The Central Division, not surprisingly, is one of the lower ones, as is the East Central Division. The East Central Division averaged just a shade over 17 inches, and that's 91% of their normal. The Central Division averaged 14.82 inches, which is about 92% of normal. Everybody else is higher than that. So again, we're not really seeing the extreme or severe drought that is plaguing the northern plains. When you're that close to normal, there have been years that have been a whole lot drier.
And we'll note in the outlook here shortly that this coming week may feature still more off and on chances of rainfall around Kansas. On the temperature side, Mary, it is remarkable how these cooler readings have held on for this long. We're going on well over a week now of lower than normal temps.
Right, and they've not just lower than normal, but significantly lower than normal. The warmest divisions were the Southwest and the South Central divisions, and both of those were more than 5 degrees cooler than average.
And that was the closest to the norm, right?
That was the closest to the norm. The Northeast division is the farthest from the norm, and we were averaging just a shade under 9 degrees cooler than normal. It was actually 8.7 degrees cooler than normal. So again, very, very cool, much more typical for mid-September. If these temperatures would continue on the same trend, by September they would be normal. By October they would be warmer than normal. But at this time of the year, it's a little bit on the cool side. We should note that for this last week, ending on August 8th, no one hit the century mark. We had a couple of 99-degree readings in Southwest and South Central, but not breaking that 100-degree line. And we had some temperatures dip into the 40s for our lows in the North Central and the Northeastern division. The Northeast dropped down to 49, and in the North Central they dropped down to 47. And of course, those low temperatures below 50 are beginning to be problematic for the sorghum. It's a warm season crop and doesn't appreciate these cooler temperatures.
We will continue to monitor that. So what the outlook is telling us, into the weekend, once more, we do have the here and there shot at rainfall.
Right. It looks like the bulk of the energy from this system is going to go to our south, with Oklahoma being kind of on the recipient of as much as 6 inches of rainfall. And not surprisingly, our southern counties are the ones that are going to be into the heaviest area of that rain. And again, southeastern Kansas may see some significant amounts. But when we look at the week ending next Friday, statewide, we're actually faring pretty well. Everybody should see 3/4 of an inch to an inch or more. There is a pocket of the boundary between northwest and north central Kansas that may see as much as 2 inches. In the southeast, they may see as much as 3 inches again for the week. But again, statewide, I'm looking at an inch plus. And it does look like this may be a more widespread event than the last one, and we'll see how that plays out.
And the mild temperatures to hang on?
The cooler than normal temperatures are expected to continue for another week at least. Then the confidence in that cool trend decreases a little bit. The updated August outlook that was issued at the end of July was for cooler than normal for the month. And given our very cool first half of the month,
we'll get there.
It's likely that we'll maintain that even if we do bump up into those warmer temperatures as school gets back in session.
And one quick footnote here, the latest oceanic signals on La Nina are suggesting that we may be in the clear as far as that goes going into the fall.
Right. It is in the neutral phase now. The Climate Prediction Center has issued an update on that, and it looks like that neutral phase will continue through our fall season and into the winter. There is a very slight chance that it might develop a La Nina during the winter time. If we had had a fall onslaught, we do have a very strong signal for drier than normal and warmer than normal conditions. And again, that doesn't look like it's in the cards at this time.
That's good news indeed. As always, we appreciate the input, Mary. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
She's Mary Knapp, Research and Extension climatologist at K-State, and she briefs us every Friday here on Kansas Agricultural Weather. Our time is away for today, and our thanks to you for tuning in. Eric Atkinson here. This has been Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.